back home in Liberia, soccer was the one thing that brought everyone together.
What's up, man?
It was about May 1990. At that point, the rebels haven't arrived in Monrovia yet. They was in the outskirts of Monrovia. We were fortunate to be one of the few family that could afford escaping at that point. So we went to Sierra Leone. We arrived in Freetown, and we live in a hotel.
Yo, what's up, brother? What's up, man?
For the first 3 months or so, we live a similar life like we did back in Liberia, where we had maid in the hotel with us, we had food, and everything seems to be fine. With the understanding that once the rebels get to Monrovia, everything will subside, and pretty soon we'll return back home, because it was our first civil war and we didn't quite understand the impact or the magnitude of a civil war. But 3 months expanded to 6 months, 6 months expanded to 9 months, and soon we found ourselves as true refugees in Sierra Leone.
I like hiking because it reminds me of home, but it also reminds me when I cross the border, mainly because when I hike, I can take my time and enjoy the hike, whereas when I ran across the border, it was a mad rush. I had a really good childhood in Bolivia. I went to private school. I had lots of friends. I played sports. I had a great life. I was there until I was 12. And then my mother had this crazy idea that we needed to come to the United States.
Good morning.
My name is Eileen Villegas. I'm originally from Bolivia, and I came to the US in March of 1985.
My name is Fambala Keikala Zazar, and I'm originally from Monrovia, Liberia. It's a tiny country in West Africa.
We could not get a visa to the US. We could only get a visa to Mexico. It was very hard to get a visa to the US. We ended up in Tijuana. We met our coyote the first night. The journey was supposed to be very brief and fast, so it wasn't supposed to be like weeks and months. It was just going to be like you land, you cross, then you fly to Virginia and you're done. That is not what happened.
My family ran out of money and we had to relocate. So at that point I was 11 years old, so we had to fend for ourselves. So one thing that my mother did was have a cell in the streets of Sierra Leone. As with any human being, your first thinking is, I need to get something to eat. How do I get something to eat? At this point, I have to sell to get something to eat. So you don't think that just a few months ago, I had everything and I could afford everything. At this point, you're thinking that I have to sell to eat. So you essentially disregard the past and continue to move forward, because at that point, you just put yourself within survival mode.
When we met our coyote, he said, I have to cross with somebody else tonight, so you're going to cross with this other person. So we followed this other person who wasn't our original coyote and smuggler. So he took us to this house and run down somewhere in Tijuana, and there was like rats, and there was like 20, 25 people there, all ages and sexes. We were all cramped into this little one room where I remember seeing rats, and it was dark and we had to wait. He said, we're gonna wait until dark. We're gonna go to the border. There's the fence is already cut off. We're gonna cross. We're gonna wait until the helicopter goes the other way, and then we're gonna run. The land between San Diego and Tijuana is very dry. There's a lot of bushes that have thorns. So the coyote that helped us cross that night, he said, yes, so if you hear a helicopter, hide into the bushes and just duck until you hear him leave, and then we'll all run. If you see the car, run. Just run in opposite directions. So that evening, it was midnight. At the time, I don't know what the border fence looks like now, but at the time it was just a chain link fence that people would just cut, and they were, holding for people to get through in there. So we opened the hole, and there was people like having bonfires at one side, and it was lots and lots of groups of people. Like you can see them all lined up around the fence, waiting. And then the helicopters left, and it was a mad rush. So there was groups of people that just made mad rushes in different directions with different smugglers. So we started running. The helicopter came, I remember this, and then my mother and I ducked underneath a bush, and it was very prickly because I'm sure I had thorns in my hands. And then the helicopter left, and we all ran up and started running. And the coyote would be like, just keep running, but he was behind us. And we got surrounded by immigration cars. So they rounded us up, and then they started questioning every single one of us. Like, where are you from? What are you doing? And, why are you going to the States? And then my mother and I spoke like Mexicans. Like they said, what is your name? We had to lie about our names. We had to lie about everything, like what we did, what we didn't do. And we just lied about everything and spoke like Mexicans. So they sent us back to Tijuana.
Whatever we were selling wasn't making enough money for us to afford food and rent. So at that point, the UN had opened a refugee camp a little bit further out, away from the city. And then when we were in the refugee camp, interestingly enough, another civil war started in Sierra Leone, and it was essentially a byproduct of the war that was going on right next door in Liberia. So we had again move away from Sierra Leone. You are thinking literally, how do I get from this moment to this moment? How do I put myself into a safe position? Okay, now I'm safe. Now I realize I'm hungry. How do I feed myself? The cycle continues again the next day. How do I move from this one moment to this one moment, maintaining my safety? How do I eat? And that's how you sort of progress in those moments or in those situations.
The second night, each one of us had a smuggler. My mother had one, I had one, and the smuggler said, whatever happens, you just keep running. We're just gonna run. You're not gonna walk, you're gonna run. So my mother and the head smuggler went, and then I went with the younger smuggler. So as soon as we followed the same routine, we went to the fence, waited, and then it was just a mad rush. So my mother and I started running, but my mother got ahead with one smuggler, and I could see her. She was getting further and further away, and then my knee popped out of place, and I was just like, oh, in pain. And then the guy said, you have to keep going. And my mom turned around and she tried to turn back, and the smuggler said, you have to keep going, they'll catch up. So we started running. I was in a lot of pain. The guy was like, you're gonna be okay, we're almost there.
We got in a bus from Sierra Leone and traveled all the way to Guinea. And from Guinea, we stayed in Guinea. We didn't quite stay in Guinea that long. It was just essentially a pass-through country. But then we went to Ivory Coast, Abidjan. We stayed in Abidjan. I want to say we stayed in Abidjan maybe about for 3 months in the capital of Ivory Coast, which is Abidjan. But it was just essentially a transition point, meaning that the final destination was Accra, Ghana, specifically Budbura Refugee Camp. We stayed there, I want to say from the late 1991 or early 1992, all the way when we left in August of 1993, before we joined our father in the United States. We came through the resettlement program, the United States Refugee Resettlement Program. And the program is, once you get here, you literally not too long after, like a few weeks after, they give you a green card.
Once we made it, there was a white van waiting for us at the opposite end. And the same at the opposite end, there was just like this fence, and the guy was waiting in a van. They put us in a van, the coyote was with us, and we went to a Red Roof Inn. I will always remember that because I was like, wow, this is so fancy, this hotel is so fancy. I didn't know what it was, so we stayed at the Red Roof Inn for one night. Then the next day, a contact that we had in California through a friend of a friend, she picked us up. We stayed at her house for one day, and then she said, okay, I have your tickets to go to Virginia the next day. So she took us to the airport, and then we flew to Virginia, to Reagan. Wow. When I came here, ESL classes were very limited. Everything was in English. So when I got my first report card, it was all Fs. I didn't know what an F was, and I was devastated because I had never gotten an F in my life. So I talked to the doctor and I said, I don't know what this is. And she said, because you don't know the language, it's very hard. And the only ESL class we had was to be able to communicate in English, but it didn't really help with the other major classes. So the doctor got me a Spanish-English dictionary, and every night I would sit with her and we'd go through the whole dictionary. So I learned English in 6 months, and then by the time I finished 7th grade, I was straight A student.
When I first came to the United States, this was in the 90s, and these kids weren't used to anything that wasn't purely American attire. So we got made fun of a lot for what we wore, how we spoke. And then even worse, because when we cook in our house, we cook with a lot of spices. So as you can imagine, if you live in a small apartment with a lot of people, your clothes will always smell like the food and smell like spices. And then when you get on the school bus, the kids would make a lot of fun of you because you didn't quite, smell right. You smell like spices and smell like things that they couldn't quite understand. And so we got made fun of a lot in high school, for the way we talk, our accent, and the way we dress, the fact that we're wearing cheaper clothes, and in most of the time the way we smell in the school bus. So it was very, very traumatic. Even for a while, into your 20s and 30s, you still remember those experiences. It was really tough.
You can't even see your table because it's covered up. Yeah. Because of the curtains. And then she's like, as a kid, you're just gonna waste your money.
I have a daughter, and I've raised her to always work hard and not to rely on anybody and to always be independent. And I always tell her, as an adult, you have to give and you'll get back 10 times fold.
I'm married with 2 kids, live in the suburb of Virginia.
Did your team win? Did your team win?
Yeah, we won 3-0.
Yeah!
And what advice I would have for them? I think it goes beyond them, right? What advice I would have for any young person is work hard, have integrity, and build good relationships. You need to have those 3 things as your anchor in this life.
You want the whole thing?
The United States, as much problem we have, I think it's still one of the greatest country, or the greatest country in the world, where you can come from nowhere, work very, very hard, regardless of your situation, right? And you dedicate yourself and you are honest, you do well. That shows you how much a chef I am. Got to put the meatloaf in the rice so you can have it eat the meatloaf.
I remember going to visit a friend in San Diego 15 years after arriving here, and we decided to go visit the Mexico side. Once we walked across the border, I saw the huge Mexican flag, and then I saw the hills that I ran across for the first time in the daytime, as opposed when I ran across them, it was nighttime. So I cried because it reminded me of what I ran across. And also the hotel, the Red Roof Inn that we stayed at that one night when we arrived was still there. I still think back, because if I was able to do what I did 38 years ago, then I can finish this hike. It might take me longer, but I'll get it done.